Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about this coffee grinder right here. This is the Varia VS3. Highly anticipated, very exciting because it's fairly affordable for what it offers. It's a cute little package and a lot of people are talking about it. Now today, I want to talk about its features, its performance, its value for money, but also compare it to some very competitive grinders in the market. We're going to be comparing it to the ODE Generation 2 and also the optional Lagom Mini. It's going to be an interesting one. And later in this video, I'm going to do a blind tasting where we do 3 cups of coffee and see if I can decipher which coffee grinder is which cup. Now, before we do this, do me a favor, Camp Squad, scroll down on this video, tap that like button down below. Love each and every single one of you for taking a second to do that, it really helps. And comment down below your New Year's resolution. How many bags of coffee did you drink in 2022? And before we dive into this, a quick word from today's sponsor, which is Third Wave Water. Now in this video, we're going to talk about coffee grinders and how they benefit the cup of coffee that you produce. It's a very important attribute of brewing coffee, but probably most overlooked is water. And that's where Third Wave Water comes in. This is a product I've been using for years on my coffee bar, and this is a water supplement. You take distilled or demineralized water and you add something like Third Wave Water, and it makes the perfect brewing coffee water. Now right here, I've got one for the dark roast profile, I've got their classic profile, and there's also an espresso profile that helps protect your espresso machines. If you've been overlooking your water, you might be missing one of the most important attributes to brewing the best cup of coffee that you can. It's super simple. This is how I do it. Now personally, I take this big 5-gallon jug and I take one of their 5-gallon jug sticks and I use this to fill up a glass jug to reduce waste that then fills up my kettle. Don't just take my word for it. Go try Third Wave Water. There's a discount code in the link down below. It'll help make your coffee even better. So Varia is a newer brand to the coffee industry. They're kind of a middle of the pack. They're not a premium brand, but they're definitely not making cheap breakable components either. And you can tell, right? Everything feels really well built. It feels very solid. It feels very intentional. It definitely is their own DNA. There isn't a grinder that looks exactly like the VS3 on the market right now. It's pretty unique. Now, how it works is you've got a single dosing hopper on the top here. You put your beans up to 30 grams in the top. You can adjust your grind with this stepless grind adjustment here. And then on the side, you've got a little power button that activates the motor, turns on the burrs that spin at 165 RPMs, grind up those grounds, depending on what grind size you have here, into your magnetic dosing cup. And then you can use the bellows, which goes on the top of your hopper. You put your lid on top of that. Basically just forces air through the ground chamber to force any coffee grounds that are stuck in here. And from my experience, you do need to use this for the best results, even though it's really, really ugly. Does anybody enjoy the look of bellows? But for now, I'm gonna take that off. Let's grind some coffee and let's talk about some of these things that we just mentioned. So it's quiet, it's not overly fast, it's not overly slow, but it's definitely slower than my preference. But as you notice there, you definitely need the bellows. You absolutely need to either use a little spritz of water on your coffee beans to reduce static. It's pretty bad otherwise. It's not as bad for espresso, but for filter coffee, you're gonna get a lot of chaff all around the nozzle, the little nose here. This is a grinder that's also really easy to clean. It's also magnetic and everything comes apart with ease. With unscrewing the hopper here, you can see the grind chamber, which is simple, easy to clean. Within the grind chamber, you have 4 sweeper arms beyond the burr that push out the grounds outside of the grind chamber. And obviously this grinder is also on a slight angle, again, to all help reduce that retention. But again, I'm gonna repeat myself here. You really do need this bellows. For me, this isn't a zero retention grinder without this bellows. And for the most part, you shouldn't have to purge any coffee through, again, when using this bellows. Now, a couple other thoughts before moving on to the competitors here. The Varia is a joy to use. It's got a great zero system, so when you screw this all the way tight, it's gonna go to zero pretty much every time. It's very easy. To dial in a coffee, it makes sense, and anything around, 4 to 2 is where I'm at for espresso. It's very simple, and based on the coffee, I know where to roughly be, which is just always a joy to use. It just makes grinding coffee a more enjoyable experience. So let's talk about these two. Now, again, this is the fellow ODE Generation 2, and this is the optional Lagom Mini. Now, some key differences between these two. Like I mentioned, this is a 38mm conical burr, but this here has a 64mm flat burr. It's really easy to distinguish what's happening in a cup of coffee, where conical burrs can be known to more blend those flavors together to create some more complexity in a cup. And some people prefer that, some people don't. But keep in mind, the Varia can do espresso. The fellow ODE Generation 2, it can't. Now the fellow ODE Generation 2 is also going to beat the VS3 in terms of the static and the static that it produces, because the ODE Generation 2 creates almost zero static because it has a built-in ionizer to remove any static as it's grinding coffee. It's a fantastic technology. I would love to see it on so many more grinders. Now it's also got a very easy dial on the front to just dial in coffees, adjust grind size. It's got a little knocker to knock any coffee grounds out after grinding. It's even got an auto off feature to turn off the motor once it realizes there's no tension in the grind chamber. It looks great, just like the Varia VS3 does, and we'll compare these taste profiles very shortly. But first, let's talk about this one right here. Now this grinder and the VS3 are easily the most competitive in terms of their feature set. Now this grinder is the optional Lagom Mini. Like the VS3, this one also has a conical burr, but this one's an advertised 48mm burr. Now, keep in mind, optional actually measures their burr geometry or burr diameter slightly differently. So we'll remove these burrs and you'll see how much bigger that burr actually is. But that's what they advertise, and they have two different burr options. Really, it's just one burr with different coating. The VS3, mind you, also has different burr options. Same thing, same burr, different coatings. So today, we're not going to talk about that because that's just a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. That being said, the optional Lagom Mini also has stepless grind adjustments. Now, optional does not list the RPM speed on the Lagom Mini, but it's noticeably faster than the VS3, and in my experience, it's around 300 RPMs, give or take, on power. Listen to the sound of the motors to see if you can tell the difference. You would think that would impact the cup in terrible ways for the optional Lagom Mini, because typically faster on conicals can mean more fines, but that's not necessarily the case, and we'll taste that very soon. Both of these use magnetic cups. You can see their sheet design is very interesting and very similar. And what I find very fascinating is even their hopper is nearly identical in design, but I can see some inspiration here from the Option-O, which, hey, this grinder here is $385 from Option-O before shipping, and from Prima or other places in the US, it can be closer to $500 US, which is a big difference in price. But this here can be a very, very enticing option for a lot of people as a budget alternative to this guy here, as long as it tastes as good, right? Again, we'll talk about that. Now, before we taste these, let's do a quick speed test. Each of these, I will put 20 grams of coffee in and see which one grinds 20 grams of coffee at a filter coffee setting for like a finer V60 the fastest. Let's start a timer. 3, 2, 1. Okay, the ODE's done in 10 seconds. Not surprising. These two are both going at it. Which will finish first? Okay, the Option-O is done at 24 seconds. The Varia is still going. And you can see the static on this. This one about 34 seconds. So it seems 10-second difference between these three grinders. By no surprise, this guy right here is the fastest. Flat burrs, and this spins at a faster RPM at up to 1400, I believe. It's very, very fast. It's very efficient. You can grind big doses in a quick amount of time. This one here, 24 seconds for 20 grams. Completely reasonable. And then over here for the Varia, it's totally doable, but 33 seconds, 34 seconds for 20 grams. Some hand grinders are almost as fast as this, so it's definitely on the slower side. All right, let's brew some coffee. And swap these around to a blind cupping and see if I can guess which one's which. Disclaimer, annoying slurp sounds ahead. Okay. I think this is the ODE. This one is just clearly different than the other two. These ones are more similar for sure. The 𝙬𝙤𝙤 is just, it's got this sparkling acidity and this transparency that just feels very clean. It feels like the flavors are very easy to distinguish. It's not as complex as these two. It's a little more simple, if I could just explain it in that way. But these two, if they are what I think they are, they're both conical burrs, and that would mean, you know, it would really represent the complexity and the extra sweetness I'm getting from these. Now, this one here seems the most muted and muddy of the two. It's not bad, but comparing to the other two, oh, this one just has such a great, again, sparkling acidity. It's got good sweetness, but this one here just a little more complex than this one. And some people would prefer that, and some people would prefer this one here. I think more enthusiasts would prefer this profile for just how clean those cups are. I think a lot of people, myself included, would also like this one. So I think that one's the Lagom Mini, that one's the ODE, and this one is the Varia. And I think this is one of the easier tasting comparisons. So let's try it out. This one here has got to be the ODE. Number 3, so that one is the ODE. That one was easy to distinguish. I mean, flat burrs versus conical burrs. If you tasted those side by side, it makes sense. These two, less confident on, but I'm still pretty confident. These ones are pretty different in flavor profiles. Is this the VS3? Number 1, yes, it is the VS3, and that would mean this is number 2. That is that. Okay, so after tasting these three, what can we take away from this comparison? I honestly think it's pretty simple. The optional Lagom Mini is a $385 coffee grinder. That's before shipping costs and available stock. Some places to purchase the Lagom Mini, it's almost $100 more. That being said, it's still my favorite electric compact conical burr grinder. It does espresso and filter coffee, and with the moonshine burrs in here or the obsidian burrs, it just produces really delicious coffee that competes with grinders more expensive than it. The ODE Generation 2, I currently think it's one of the best values, and had this been $50 cheaper, it would have been in my under $300 comparison, because the cups that this grinder produces are fantastic. But let's talk about the VS3, because that's what this video is all about. This is a $299 grinder, and while it's still not cheap, it's still expensive, you're really only going to notice these differences in a side-by-side comparison. I think only enthusiasts might notice the difference in cup quality, and the average consumer is going to be happy with the VS3. Now, it's very important that we mention the espresso from the VS3, because to this point, $299 for an espresso grinder was very hard to find, and that's really exciting that the VS3 offers that. Yes, it can produce espresso, and the espresso it produces is good. It's what you'd expect from a conical grinder around this size. It's got some good sweetness, a lot of complexity, and definitely some good body, which you want from espresso, at least from a conical burr. The VS3 doesn't disappoint in those attributes. Again, if I was to choose between the two, I personally probably would pick the Lagom Mini, but it's more money and it's harder to find. The VS3 is newer and it hasn't been proven yet, so I've treaded lightly in terms of the vocabulary I've used in recommending this for espresso. They advertise that yes, you can use this for espresso, so you can use it for espresso. I have just used my words carefully, so I'm not the person that you point your finger at saying Kyle told me you can brew espresso. But when it comes to very, very light roasted coffee, you might want to approach that with caution. In fact, Varia themselves has messaged me and said, when using very, very light roasts on the Varia VS3, feed the hopper slowly so you don't overload the gearbox. For most people, that won't be an issue. Overall, I think the Varia VS3 is a fantastic coffee grinder for $299. Sure, the competition here today makes it a little harder. And I'm not going to say this is the best grinder of the three, because it's not. Personally, I think the ODE is the best filter coffee grinder if you're just wanting filter coffee. I think the optional Lagom Mini is the best overall grinder if budget isn't a concern. But the Varia VS3 comes very close to both of these for being cheaper and from a brand who hasn't made electric grinders before. But now I want to hear from you. What would you choose out of these three, and are any of these coffee grinders interesting to you? Be sure to like that video on the way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.